Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome again to Cultivating Community, a speaker series. My name is Roxana Pardo Garcia with La Roxy Productions, and I am so excited to welcome you all to event 4 of our series. I think we'll do next slide. I'm so excited to welcome you all to Cultivating Community Abundance, where we have an incredible panel of folks who are going to share what they have been doing as it relates to philanthropy, as it relates to abundance. So excited for you all to learn and listen to this wonderful panel. And I pass it over to Kai.
Welcome, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Kalayaan Domingo. You can also call me Kai. I am the lead for Communities of Opportunity Learning Community, which is hosting today's event. Next slide. Okay, whoops, sorry. I was ready to give you a little introduction about COO, but we're actually going to start with land acknowledgement. That our community partners from the Sun Partnership, the Seattle Urban Native Nonprofit Partnership has shared with us. And today we just want to make sure that we both acknowledge and honor that we are in the homeland of the first people of this land, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Puyallup, Snoqualmie, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, and Tulalip tribes. We raise our hands to honor the descendants of the Coast Salish people. We thank them for their hospitality as the first people of this land and for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. We honor the immense, immeasurable, and often unrecognized contributions and sacrifices of the Coast Salish Indigenous people, and we acknowledge the ongoing disparities of racism and political invisibility experienced by the Coast Salish and Indigenous people of this land. Thank you. As we begin, I will just give us a grounding in Communities of Opportunity. So Communities of Opportunity is a cross-sector partnership between Seattle Foundation and King County. We have 4 strategies that we work on. Really, the initiative is grounded in addressing the social, health, and economic inequities that we see in King County by listening to our community partners and supporting the strategies and solutions that our community holds in order to create transformation. We do this through place-based and cultural community partnerships, through system and policy change work, as well as through our learning community, which serves as an opportunity for us to build relationship, share in the learning of solutions and actions, to deepen our capacities and skills, as well as to create a platform for us to really learn from each other, which is what we're doing today. We aim to focus on housing, economic opportunities, as well as health, the conditions that we live in, and looking at how we build stronger community connections to really drive the change that we are hoping to see. Next. So today is, as Roxana said, our 4th series in our Cultivating Community speaker series. We will have 6 total, so stay tuned for information about the 2 series that are coming up. We have our past recordings on our website that we hope you can listen into. And really, we've been on a journey around hearing from our community partners about how we are shifting our communities, shifting our approaches, and now how we're actually creating the conditions that we want to see. So today, thinking about how we activate the assets and resources that we have in our broader community to support community-driven work. Our last session was so powerful. I want to give gratitude and thank our panelists, Ginger Kwan from Open Doors, Mary Kumar from Potlatch and Sun, as well as Jamae Marsh from Feast, and our moderator, Paula Moran, who's also one of our governance group members for Communities of Opportunity. In our last session, we heard so much wisdom And I want to share just a couple of the learnings that we took away from that last session. So from our panelists, we heard how they're using this opportunity right now of living through a pandemic to challenge and to change the systems and structures that we're operating in that actually are contributing to the inequities that we face in our communities. They talked about both the organizations that they work in, as well as the ways in which they're changing the structures of the communities and our larger society that we're living in. They also talked about the importance of our families, our communities, and our histories as assets to inspire and ground us in healing, restoration, and resilience. This is really the only way that we can continue through this really challenging time. And when we're living in inequities, it's always challenging. And so we're always leaning into the places where we can take breaks, where we can gain strength, and where we can heal. An important point that Mary raised up was really the practice and importance of reclaiming our ancestral and traditional practices and stories. And this has actually been a theme throughout our entire series. We've also heard about this crisis of a pandemic, as well as needing to identify solutions to address inequities, is where we lead with our values. This is an opportunity for us to build power, to build sustaining relationships, and for us to care and heal for ourselves individually as well as collectively. And that even if the work changes, if we're leaning into those values, we're going to continue to make deep change. We also really heard that this was the opportunity to shift and create transitions. We are often working in one direction, and this pandemic has created the opportunity for us to throw it all out and to really lean in, to be nimble, flexible, responsive, and build emergent strategies to form new partnerships and new ways of work that we hope will continue with us throughout the pandemic and into the future that we're collectively building. There was so much more wisdom, and I hope that you all can check in on any of our other sessions in our link, which I just saw got dropped into the chat. So for our upcoming session, I'll go to the next slide. Cultivating Community Abundance. I think actually someone else is going to introduce all the panelists. So I'm going to continue on to the next slide. If you have questions and that are coming up, you can go ahead and write them in the chat or the Q&A button. And towards the end of the series or the session, we're going to be posing those questions back to the moderator and the facilitator, and have those questions be facilitated. Some of them we might answer directly if they're more like links or things we can respond to. There is the ability to have closed captions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see the CC option. And if any point you are having challenges, just go ahead and write in the chat or look for Caroline Burney, who is helping with our tech today. I will pass it over to Roxana to get us started with today's panel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kai. And again, welcome to everybody to today's event. Welcome back to those who have been joining us on this journey of the speaker series. As you all know, for those of you who've been here before, we always kick off with a grounding exercise. And the purpose of the grounding exercise is we do not know where everybody is coming from. We do not know what kind of morning you have had. We don't know what conditions you are engaging in this conversation today. And so we just want to provide a moment, a second, a couple of breaths to be able to just to help regulate our nervous system. Our nervous system has been severely impacted by this pandemic. It has been incredibly inflamed. And so we want to just provide some time. Hopefully it's not the only time, but perhaps it is, that you get to just sit in some peace and some calm and engage your breath. And so I just ask of our panelists and of those who are in the room with us today to just take a moment to sit comfortably or to lay comfortably wherever you may be. Make sure your feet are planted on the floor, and just take a couple of deep breaths. And as you are taking those deep breaths, I want to remind you of the sacredness of your breath. I want to remind you of how vital your breath is to you and to your body, to our ecosystem, to our ancestors, to this work. And I just want to remind you that as we breathe, as we inhale deeply and we exhale deeply, as we continue to do so, may it remind us that we need to breathe and that we need to breathe deeply, because oftentimes we forget. And so thank you so much for partaking in that with me. I hope that you actually engage in your breathing and drink some water and eat some snacks throughout today's event. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the moderator for today's panel. I'm so excited and so honored to be able to introduce today's moderator. Dion Foster brings a wealth of experience in strategy development, public policy research, social movement funding, and advocacy to her work as executive director at Progress Alliance. Dion has worked as a grassroots organizer, mayoral policy advisor, researcher, and funder on issues as diverse as climate justice, youth employment, and legal protection for diverse gender identities. The common thread of her career has been organizing people, information, and resources to advance progressive policy and racial equity. Before joining the Progress Alliance, Dion was a senior program officer at Seattle Foundation, where she aligned resources strategically in support of policy and systems change by and for low-income communities, and in support of policy and systems change by and for low-income communities and communities of color. Dion was raised in Virginia and is a graduate of George Mason University and the University of Washington. When she is not working, she loves to rock climb, read, and adventure with her kiddo. Dion joined Progress Alliance in January of 2021. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Dion as today's moderator.
Thank you so much, Roxana. It is such a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. And I get the pleasure of introducing the incredible community of panelists that we have. And it's great to be back with COO, as I used to work really closely with COO in my previous role. So I'm going to introduce the panel and then we will jump right into it. And you all, folks who are participants, I think people who have been here before already know there's an opportunity to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to type in questions during the panel. So we love if you can use that instead of using the chat. That'll help us kind of keep track of any questions that folks are bringing. And with that, I get to introduce these incredible folks. So up first is Alejandra Pérez. Ale has a passion for education equity and comes from a background of advocacy with and for undocumented students and their families in Washington State. Ale has an extensive background in organizing for social justice, running large-scale events and conferences, providing professional development to educators. She served as co-director for the Beyond HB 1079 conference, was a member of the DREAM Educational Empowerment Program National Advisory Council, and is a community organizer with the Washington Dream Coalition. As part of her community work, Ale was one of the co-founders of the grassroots COVID-19 Relief Fund for Undocumented Individuals in Washington State, and a leader of the Washington Immigrant Relief Fund. Ale moved to the United States when she was 12 years old and graduated from Cleveland High School in Seattle and went on to earn her Bachelor's of Arts and Master's of Education from the University of Washington, Bothell. Ale currently works as a college and career manager at the Center for Community, or the Community Center for Education Results. We are so happy to have you with us, Ale. Up next, it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Twana Nobles. Twana Nobles is a senator from the 28th Legislative District of Washington State. She also serves as the president and CEO of the Tacoma Urban League, where she leads programs to strengthen and support the local African American community and social equality and economic independence. In response to the uprising for racial justice in 2020, Twana, along with 3 other Black women, co-founded the Black Future Co-op Fund, our state's first philanthropy created by and for Black Washingtonians in order to ignite Black generational wealth, health, and well-being. Growing up, Twana and her family faced many challenges, including homelessness, which led Twana to move into foster care at the age of 15. She was determined not to become a statistic and applied her passion, energy, and hard work to graduate high school and go on to become an educator. Education has always been central to her life, and she believes strongly in giving back to the community that helped her succeed. Previously, Senator Nobles worked as an instructor for the Metropolitan Development Council's College Beyond program at Stadium High School and Lincoln High School in Tacoma, served as a PTA leader and a school board member. She also founded Ladies First, an in-school and after-school program dedicated to empowering young women and building self-esteem. She attended the University of Puget Sound, where she earned an undergraduate and a master's degree in teaching. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Nobles. Up next, it is my pleasure to introduce Alejandra Trace. She immigrated to the US from Argentina after her own country's democracy crumbled. She has since devoted her life to finding and developing leaders to build power that propels the common good for their community and by extension for our whole region. She is thrilled to work alongside committed, talented, and tenacious community leaders and organizers. She believes that the best solutions are community-led and that anyone, regardless of the details of their background, can be a change maker. She is a co-founder of Comunidad Latina de Vashon, where she helps craft organizing campaigns based on the brilliance of local leaders, especially young people who always remind her to make the work fun. She is thrilled to be a co-founder of the unincorporated BIPOC Economic Alliance with Skyway and White Center, where hundreds of youth, business owners, and community leaders wrote, called, testified, and hand-wrote their stories to legislators to encourage them to build a better economic future. This year, Alejandra was given the American Society of Public Administration Call to Service Award for relentlessly recruiting people to join her in the fun and fierce work of remaking the world as it should be. Welcome. And lastly, I get to introduce Rebecca Berry. Rebecca is a Black, white, Alaskan Native, Mexican, and Filipino woman, born and raised mostly in South Seattle. Her lifelong passion for advocacy was born after she entered the foster care system in adolescence. She later served as a court-appointed special advocate, supporting youth in similar positions, which cemented her desire to serve in advocacy and to help empower those most impacted, yet furthest away from power. Her work experience included private and public nonprofit sectors and helped guide her through community college classes to earning a master's degree in public education, which enhanced her passion for advocacy. She was recently hired as the Skyway Coalition Manager, which is a dream job for Rebecca. Building on the work and expertise of leaders before her, she is excited to help shape this organization and serve the community she lives in. At the core, the coalition aims to champion the voices of their primarily Black and Brown community with regard to anti-displacement efforts, affordable housing, and economic development. Wow. We have the best panel. I cannot wait to have this conversation. Just to get us started, and just because we're so disconnected sometimes with the internet, I want to ask, how are y'all? How are you doing? And what has this past year and a half looked like for you? And we will start off with Ale, and then we'll go through the panel in the order that I introduced you all. How are you, Ale?
Hi. I'm like, good morning, but it's afternoon.
I know.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm definitely, I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody at my job, and I've definitely been the most burnt out that I've been this past year. I was pretty involved when I was in college and all that stuff, but the level of work that we have done throughout the pandemic is unimaginable, that the burnt out has felt more real than ever. And somehow the last couple of months, I've been the less busy I've actually been with work and with my organizing work because I needed a break, and that burnout continues to be there. I had the privilege even to take a month off of vacation at my job, and I still feel that burnt out. And I think that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling very grounded right now. I have family from Guatemala here, which is really exciting. I can hear them while I'm here. But that keeps me grounded, but I cannot deny that burnout that continues to happen. And I think it's just I feel constantly, I'm constantly feeling tired, whether that's physically or mentally. And I think that's just really important to acknowledge. And feeling like I'm both good and burnt out, and that both can coexist at the same time. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah, thank you for that honesty and welcome. Senator Nobles, how are you?
Hi, thank you for asking and thanks for having me today. I think I'm doing okay. It definitely is a busy season. Obviously, this past year and a half, we launched the Black Future Co-op Fund, and I still run a nonprofit, but I also started my first legislative session fully remotely. So I think it's been a year and a half of learning new things, meeting new people, building relationships, but from so far away on a Zoom screen. So it's been very different. And then I have children at home, 3 who are, who had been remote learning, but who are now back in in-person school. So it's a busy season, but I think far less busy than if we were in a pandemic and accessing each other remotely. I don't know that I could have managed this past year and a half, everything on my plate if I had to be in person to all of those different things. But I think being able to pause and, maybe make dinner in between Zoom calls or events, and honestly be more available than ever for my family because I'm here in a home more than I have in a long time since I stayed home. But honestly, I feel blessed for the things I get to do for myself and my family and my community, and just interested in continuing to find ways to help us all to survive this pandemic and stay hopeful. But I'm hanging in there. Our family is well for the most part, although my son is home with, cold-like symptoms today. So it doesn't seem like it's COVID, but he definitely has a cough. But outside of that, we feel blessed, and I'm definitely excited for this panel and this conversation today. So thank you to all the participants, and thank you all again for having me.
Thank you for that, and we're happy to have you here. Alejandra, how are you?
Such a good question. I wonder how everyone is. I wish I could be in conversation with all y'all and really get the story. But I'm all right. I think I echo a lot of what everybody's saying. I think I'm simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. I think there's just been so many opportunities, and it's been a time that it's been so many emergencies, but that we also get to see hope, that we get to, I think as Kai was mentioning, like try to recreate something. If everything's falling apart, maybe we rebuild in a different way. Right. And that just feels like such a huge opportunity. But like Rebecca and I were talking the other day, and we're like, oh, we've got this. And then, we're doing like our listening season right now. So we're in conversations with like 200 families this week, which we just did 3 months ago. And at the same time, like there's so much going on, but wow, like to hear these stories of these families, I'm like, this is life, but at the same time, like I got my babies, I got my life, and trying to like translate it to them, like what's mama doing, like having them be part of it, right? Like Carlitos, like my youngest was part of like canvassing when he was like 2 for a green jobs campaign, going, hello, did you know you can save the environment and save money too? Like people are like, what is this kid? And just really trying to navigate that tension, because now he's like, I don't ever want to be an organizer, I'm organized out. And so just navigating that tension of really being present in like experiencing it in real time, not just in memory of like what you can appreciate about it, but also realizing we need breaks, and building them in however we can. I had a manicure meeting yesterday. Don't worry, no grant funds were used, but like, just trying to be creative.
But maybe they should have been.
Maybe that's part of the discussion.
Y'all have to tell us about that today.
Outcomes is grant funded manicures. Okay. Ishmael, I'm sure you're down. Anyway, okay, but thanks for asking.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have you here. And Rebecca, how are you?
Thank you, Dion. Glad to be here today. I think it's no surprise that I feel much like my fellow panelists. As I was prepping for like this question, you just can't get around that fatigue and that feeling of kind of burnout. Everything feels like an emergency. Everything is urgent. Feeling like you're reaching capacity most days, like many others. I also have small children. So I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So when I turn off the computer, I turn to my left and I'm hearing stories, and I have to hear about gym class and can we braid our hair later? And then what's for dinner? And the dog needs, there's just so many things, and it feels like it never ends. At the same time, talking with Alejandra yesterday, we were talking about, I love how she said it's just eating hope, being sustained on that hope and really pushing, being maxed out on capacity and all of the things that we're taking in. For me, personally, it's really emphasized the need to counter that with something. So I am finding myself saying, nope, I'm going to take the dog for a walk and grab a coffee. And that's not a treat. That's just basic. That's just what I need to function. So I think that before the pandemic and all of this, that was further away from me. Now it's more necessary. So I feel like I'm able to prioritize it more, if that makes sense. So definitely feeling a lot like everyone else here in the room, and really excited for today's discussion.
Thank you. It's so good to just get a second to check in with all of you. A quick request, I want to ask one of my COO colleagues to go ahead and get the thank you, put the bios in the chat. And then for the panelists, can I have you put your org names next to your names, rename yourselves with your organization name next to your name. That way the audience and attendees can just help keep track of who's connected to what throughout our discussion today. So thank you so much for doing that. And as I was listening to y'all talk, I was really struck by the duality, right, of tired and exhausted and exhilarated, right, and the burnout, but also the immense amount of creativity and generation that you all have had over these last 18 or 20 months and the things that you've developed. I know we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about abundance and creativity, but before that, I think we want to talk about its twin cousin or its relative, scarcity. So can you talk to us a little bit about what it means to have a scarcity mindset? What's the culture of scarcity, and where do the sort of paradigms, ideologies, and behaviors of scarcity come from? Just in a second. So first I'll go to Ale, and then we'll hear from other panelists, and folks should feel free to jump in as you wish.
Yeah. So when I think of a scarcity, I definitely think about it from the lens of being an undocumented person living in the US. So I'm undocumented, and the organizing work that I do comes from the Washington Dream Coalition, which is undocumented folks or formerly undocumented folks. And when I think about it, it was actually at the beginning of the pandemic last year that I really started to think about it, because I realized the ways that within the undocumented community, we think about scarcity has 100% to do with racism, capitalism, and xenophobia, right? And is this idea that because we're undocumented and we came to this country to work, we cannot give ourselves the luxury of anything, absolutely nothing. Everything that we do is to work, to be able to live where we live, and to be able to send money back home, because that's a lot of the realities that we have as undocumented folks, nothing else. And the reason I was thinking about it a lot was that because I was even debating that we started working remotely about even my workspace. And I had recently moved into the home that I'm at right now before the pandemic started. And when my place of work was like, you all are going to start working from home, I remember that all I had was my work laptop. And so I just started working from my work laptop, which is very different than like my work setup, right? It's just, like in my office, I had monitors and I had my laptop. And I remember the day that I decided to go to the office to pick up my monitors, and I did, and I put them in my room, and I was like, why do I hate this so much? And it was because my work had now come to my bedroom, not even my home, my bedroom. And that felt so, it felt very odd to me. The scarcity mindset that I had during that time is that I was completely ignoring that for the first time ever since living in the US, I had an extra room. And I could not even think of myself to use that room for myself too. And after I literally looked for a desk that could fit in my room and that could fit in that office. And I remember I was talking to my dad, I live with my dad, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I was making such a big deal of this desk. And he was like, Ale, put it in the room. Like there's a hole in the, like there's a hole in there. You'd have to see it for it to make sense. And it fits perfectly for the desk. The desk fits perfectly in there. I put it there. And that was the first time that I was like, why do I have this scarcity mindset that I have literally a whole extra room that literally is never used in my house? And I can even get to put a desk in there for me to work so that I can actually separate my bedroom from my room. Anyways, that's just an example of one of the ways that I have seen it, where even something extra that we still have accessible to us doesn't feel like it's truly ours. And that's how, for me, I started to really think about the scarcity mindset when it comes to me and my community. And that because I never had the luxury to have an extra room since living in the US as an undocumented person, I couldn't even get myself to use it. And that comes with other things that we face as undocumented folks, right? Like there are things and barriers. There are plenty of resources in this country. And because of racism and xenophobia, undocumented folks have been specifically excluded from there and therefore created scarcity. Scarcity doesn't exist. The scarcity is made by these racist systems. And therefore, that's why at least those are in our community that perpetuates them so much that even things in our personal life become scarce. So that's where it comes from for me.
When you said scarcity doesn't exist, it is made, I just got that. I'm like, yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I want to check in with the rest of the panel. Senator Nobles, Alejandra, Rebecca, things to add on, or that last line really said a lot. Y'all are like, nope, that was it. Go ahead.
I think that's really, I mean, I think it's amazing and I think it's right. And I think it's not just like made, and it's in some ways, maybe it's even encouraged by philanthropy, right? Because we have this like scarcity of like, oh, well, you have to work together in this little way and things like that. Like for a long time, like I think like there's like not just a scarcity of resources, there's a scarcity of time, there's a scarcity of like, lack of a better term, hold up, y'all, love, right? But there isn't, you know what I mean? Like there's like, yes, it's hard. And I live with the tension of what it means to organize and yet say, hey, we need to think about our spaciousness of our life, right? But like there are ways and we need to push back and we need to, I mean, like Rebecca and I like text each other pictures of us walking our dogs, like hold up, I'm walking the dog, found some geese, you know, whatever, like, you know, so that there's that. But I mean, in terms of resources, I think it's really about relationships, right? And in the last panel we were on, people were like, oh my gosh, you know, how did you traverse, you know, race and geography, rural versus urban together in an alliance? And everybody's like, how? Like, it was magical. And Ryan's just like, y'all, we had a lot of conversations. You know, like I talked to Alejandra for years before she was like, let's go into action. It's not like the action happened like overnight. There was like this love. There was this like every meeting we have starts with who are you? What really drives you? And like, how do we get each other's back? And that extends beyond like, I don't care for Rebecca because she's part of the Skyway Coalition. Like when she leaves that role, like that relationship continues. And I think like that love, like I actually once had this conversation with a lot of immigrant organization leaders, and I asked, would you be willing to just sit down and just talk with like other leaders? No goal, nothing. And they're like, yeah. And I couldn't find somebody to fund that. Like all the foundations I talked to were just like, no, what are you going to work through? Like, what's the outcome? And I'm like, the outcome is we're going to sit and we're going to learn to trust each other and like figure out who we are. And in that is going to come a wealth that we can't even imagine, but that I can't quantify for you in an outcome right now. And so like, I think that's the scarcity, is that like we're taught that like we better race around for a crumb because there ain't no way you're going to come together for a piece of toast together. And so like I think there's whole loaves. All we got to do is like start the conversation and start really like pushing back in unapologetic ways that this is the limitation we have to live with.
Yeah, I would definitely add on, Alejandra. We had she and I have been on different calls and panels and texts and all of that. So we've had a lot of these conversations, and I really heard something that she was just saying around quantifying. And when I hear the word scarcity, that's what I think about, right? You're adding, you're trying to figure out how much is there, how much do I need, how much do they have, how much time is left, how much of this. So there's really a lot of intention and energy going into assessing and trying to find out, and that just comes across as really tense and urgent and kind of individualistic in a way, because you're only thinking about kind of the pieces that are important to you instead of the larger picture of everything, and kind of thinking on the other side of it, you know, moving on to abundance as we will, thinking more like it kind of opens up my shoulders. You kind of melt into abundance in that you don't have to quantify how much they have, how much do I need, there's more than enough. So I really think about them, you know, at the same time, although, you know, we're really looking at scarcity, and thinking of where that comes from for me. Ale, I really appreciated your example and your story, and then that kind of called upon some new ideas that I was thinking about. And, you know, growing up as a multicultural young girl here in Seattle, in foster care, living in currently like an unincorporated community, that all rings scarcity to me. Like that rings like that idea. Again, I even feel tense. I even think about like quantifying how much, where's this going? So it really contrasts with abundance, like an openness, a sharingness, and a connection. And I'm just excited to continue to hear from our other panelists and continue this conversation. So thanks for that.
Thank you. And I'm really struck by the note that around, you know, trying to get together and create a space that feels open and feels abundant is the thing that people might not want to resource, right? And not understanding that that is the space of sort of infinite possibility and development, and creating those spaces where folks can be abundant and say, this is endless, and we don't know what the product is and at the outset, right? I want to actually move us to a question that is coming up for me. I'm going to skip around a little bit in the questions, y'all. But, you know, which is for, you know, because Rebecca, you opened this up to sort of speak a little bit about what does abundance mean to you? And even thinking about the ways that you all have really created that. And so, Senator Nobles, can I pass that to you to talk about the creation and the development work that you've done to build what didn't exist before?
Absolutely. When we at the Black Future Co-op Fund are thinking about abundance, we know that Black people have long been vital contributors to Washington communities and the growth of all of our economies here and industries here, from aerospace to maritime and technology. There is an abundance of genius, of joy, of humanity in the Black community. And when we created the Black Future Co-op Fund, we wanted to lead with that lens, not a deficit, but, you know, we are going to make sure that we're confronting anti-Blackness and policies that uphold anti-Blackness. But we want to make sure that we created something that was going to highlight the abundance of skill and talent and Black-led solutions to real problems in our community. And we wanted to raise money to fund those solutions. You know, there is an abundance of money to do this work. Philanthropic redlining is a real thing, and it is situated to keep us out. And so in creating the Black Future Co-op Fund, we are just determining to find that revenue and invest it in the Black community, to invest it in Black leaders and Black, you know, nonprofit organizations and Black businesses. And, you know, abundance to me personally and to us at the Black Future Co-op Fund. And there are 4 of us founders, so I want to make sure that I invite my co-founders into the space as well. But we want to make sure that we are doing this work for Black Washingtonians, but that it is led by Black Washingtonians. And again, out of abundance, not any one way to define Black people. We're US born, we're immigrants, we're refugees. We come from a variety of backgrounds and experiences, but, you know, we are Black people, and we want to fight for, you know, continued abundance in our communities and continued prosperity in our communities. And we tell people all the time, we've stepped into these roles as co-founders and architects of this fund to raise dollars, but it's a cooperative. We need the help of our community, and there is an abundance of money, and it's not ours. This money is for our community. So to me, it's really empowering to do this work, and to know that, well, I should say empowering and very liberating to know that, one, I'm not doing it on my own, that there is tremendous support, and an abundance of support and money to be invested in our communities, and to be determined by us how that funding should, by us as in the Black community, how that funding should be used, where the organizations are across Washington state that could utilize those funds. But abundance for us is just rooted in Blackness, rooted in that love, the joy, that humanity that I spoke about, and in centering that Blackness and building trust. But it's such a beautiful thing when we are able to transition and switch from that scarcity mindset to that mindset of abundance. There is so much out there. It belongs to all of us. We all have the power. We all can contribute. Let's go get it. So, we're here for it, and we love the work that we get to do at Black Future Co-op Fund, in partnership with so many of you.
And we love to see it. And I feel like one of the things I want to say that it was in what you said, but it's, I think, worth repeating, is you all created that abundance, right? You, at least for me as an outsider, you all had an idea and a vision and said, let's go get it, and brought the money in, right? And so I just want to really uplift that, and the way that you and your co-founders created that opportunity and that possibility with that vision. And I want to also pass it to Alejandra and Rebecca too, to talk about the way that you all have created abundance and coalition and community, right? And your vision for connectivity. So as I meld questions together, can you share a little bit about what abundance means to you, and also give us some background and some context for the work that you're doing? And then Ale will come to you to close us up on this question so everyone can hear about the projects.
Alejandra and I, we're making the eyes to figure out who's going to go. I love it. So Skyway, White Center, and Vashon recently, maybe within the last 6 months or so, we established this alliance. But as Alejandra shared, that didn't start then. Our origin story, as we shared on a different panel, started way back before. She was pointing out that the relationships and the connections started before, just years before, bringing people in, forwarding things, connecting. And then once we established the overlap and the challenges and similarities amongst our communities, then we were able to kind of pointedly find action, find a place where we can align and combine our powers of capacity, honestly, and knowledge, contacts, and focus. And that landed on submitting a proposal to the King County Council for the COVID-7 supplemental budget. We had reviewed it, and we did not see our unincorporated, very BIPOC communities represented at all. So we really brought together a lot of work that had taken place in our respective communities and left unheard. So we really had hundreds of letters and time and voices of community cataloged and ready to go. Most of the time, these things sit on the shelves and they're not utilized. And people say, "Oh, we listened to community. We wrote down this thing, or we checked the box. We got it." But we really took it off the shelf and we're like, "Here it is. Listen to it, use it, fund it, and fund us." So we really, that sounds really short, but it really meant that we were meeting with our council members. We met with each of the King County council members individually, collectively. We strategized, we attended a lot of the hearings, we gave testimony. A lot of the youth from Vashon, these Latina youth were making calls. I'll let her go into that, but we really found ways to have our voices be heard, while connecting to the resources and capacity of each other, really leaning into our similarities in strengths as well as the challenges of our communities. I want to leave a little bit of room here, Alejandra, but I will kind of finish up by saying we did end up getting the proposal, I would say, approved, I guess, but we had to compromise a bit there even still, we wanted to focus on our unique communities. Those were the voices that we were highlighting with the work in our proposals. And it was ultimately opened up to the entirety of unincorporated King County, going to eligible to be going to any of the other communities that might share the need. However, we really put in the work and just hundreds of hours. We can't even quantify how much time we put in to lifting our community's needs and voices. So we're currently in the process of still negotiating how to inform that RFP process so that the money can still get to our communities. So it's still a work in process. You know, we're building the ship as we're flying it. So we're still in the process of building that alliance and fulfilling our vision with that. And I will pass it to Alejandra to share what I may have missed.
Oh, no,
And Alejandra, before you do that, can I ask you, so I think, can you share a little bit about what it means to be in an unincorporated area? Many of us may know, but many of us may not. So can you weave that into your response?
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it is also about the scarcity, right? Like I remember when we were giving testimony and you know, we had you know, the best coffee in Skyway, like flipping like lattes at the same time he's waiting to give testimony. And we have like some of our workers, like, you know, he's like, this order's up while waiting to give testimony about the impact of COVID, right? There was like a city that had like 20 people who could give testimony ahead of us. And we're like, wow, that's what it feels like. So unincorporated, all we have is King County Council. We don't have a city. We don't have anybody else. So our council members and our executive is all we have, which really is tricky because it does feel like we're easy to put to the side. We have less resources in our area, so we have less resources to organize. And yet, you know, I think there's a tension here of the positive and negative stories, you know, like kind of like Senator Nobles was saying, like we are unapologetically a comunidad, and by y'all, in case y'all don't know, Vashon, if you think of it as being rich and white, it is. And then the 20% of the island that cooks, cleans, landscapes the yards of those folks. And that's my people. And when I first got here 16 years ago, we started talking about who we are. And we were really used to this process where people look at us as a collection of needs. And we're not. I mean, you give us this much and we're powerhouses. Right. So we're a collection of talent, ability, ideas, right? And the abundance of that comes from, it's not you being equitable. It's not being generous to give us like funds to do this work. It's finding good solutions. It's the best on the ground work that actually gives you like, frankly, efficient processes because it's closer to those who actually are experiencing it and not somebody somewhere else guessing at what our people need. And so, so unincorporated is tricky like that, extra tricky. And, you know, and I think extra tricky the way we approach it, because we're like not here, like if you want to be our hero, that's not what we want, right? Like we want people who get our power and want to invest in it. And so I think part of that came for the Alliance. What I will say is like, we always do, we're in the listening season process, like perennial listening season, like listening to our people, their ideas and things like that. And what happened was, you know, the council had this budget, or rather the county had this budget, and we're like, okay, we can react to the scarcity of what they want to give us, or we can approach them and say, here's our idea. And it doesn't look anything like what y'all have. And we're also not going to change it because it's our people's stories. And unless you want me to go back to the 200 families and talk to them again, I can't in the time frame you have. And so we really pushed on this, and it was like, so, I mean, it was exhilarating because like most of my families don't actually, not tech world. So it was like handwritten notes. Like it was like babies doing like paintings of what it looks like to have a good economic future. Like we got everybody involved. We had council members who were like, we never heard a call from, you know, a Latino youth before. And it was this amazing process of really coming together and being heard. And I think we kind of surprised them, to be honest. And it was successful, but it was also, you know, when the campaign ends, that's where a lot of people leave. And when you're working on the grassroots level, that's where it begins. Because I still have people going, but Alejandra, like what's going on with the $5 million? Like I thought, you know, I need the support on this and things like that. And the truth of the matter is we're getting a lot of pushback in a lot of different ways. And we're trying to navigate what that looks like. Like they're saying some of this isn't eligible for this, and this has to be switched like this. And I think a lot of folks would be like, okay, I guess that's what we have to do. But we ain't a lot of folks. And we're just like asking questions, like, can we look at this a different way? How about this? You know, like I can't go back to my people like and say, nope, it didn't fit this, you know, code 395B because of this little detail, right? Like there's always like with like ARPA money, with anything, right? Like there's this piece where you can be super safe and frankly be ineffective, or you can be creative and still be within the guidelines, but really be getting hard, like closer to the heart of things. And that's where we are on that struggle. It's still a conversation, but we're still curious. We're still pushing. We're still trying to walk our dogs and get some sleep, but we're still pushing.
And we're grateful that you are. And I want to say again, that piece that you just said at the end, like you can be safe and be ineffective, right? And the idea that putting all of those additional constraints on resources actually stops them from being spent in the way that they need to be spent to solve the problems. And I think that's something for all of us who are here, who are funders or who work in philanthropy or government, to really take to heart as one of the things that we need to be working to shift and change. So thank you for that. And that feels like just the right bridge to Ale and your work, right? To think about how you're creating abundance, especially leading with and co-leading with folks who are undocumented, who we often so many times design and fund resources that purposefully leave out undocumented folks and communities. So I'd love to hear you to speak a little bit about abundance and your work and your leadership.
Yeah, definitely. So prior to the pandemic started, the work of WDC was primarily around education efforts. So we were just mostly supporting around either training educators around how to support undocumented students, or actually working with undocumented students on like college access pathways or anything like that. And then that completely changed the minute that the pandemic started. So when the pandemic started, all of us in WDC, we're a very small group, but are either undocumented or had just previously been undocumented, but all of us, our parents are undocumented too. And we immediately saw when the pandemic started that not working for our parents means no money, 100%. During that time, you know, the stimulus checks were happening. If you were in a household that filed taxes with at least one undocumented person, you could not get the stimulus check. So that meant that our families had no access to relief. And that there was a lot of like encouraging people to just apply for unemployment, which also undocumented people cannot do. So we're like, what is gonna happen to our families? We were already seeing it in our households. And that was when WDC, we decided to start fundraising and open a fund for undocumented folks in Washington state. We had seen some national ones and we had seen other like grassroots funds happening in the state, but you know, they were not necessarily for undocumented people. So we're like, no, we need an undocumented one in Washington state. So we called up a couple of partners, and the first ones were like Scholarship Junkies, the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, and the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. But WDC was the one like spearheading that effort when it came to like reaching out to community to fundraise, but also for community to apply. And within the first, I don't know, 12 hours, we had reached over halfway through our goal. And in the 6 months that we were doing the fundraising for this relief fund, we fundraised $7.1 million. And this is a grassroots org of young folks, all under 30, doing this as volunteers, because all of us have different jobs. And we were spending, it felt like we all had like a second job during that time. But the reason it was successful is because it was community who was leading, and it was undocumented folks who were leading it. And it was, we know who our community is, we know who to reach out to. And thankfully, because a lot of us had access to other people, not even like there was people, like we got connected to some folks at Social Justice Fund, and one of them started to help us fundraise, right? They're like applying to grants for us, because we had done, we had done a CEO grant to do a program, but that was it. Like we had never had other grants before. That we were for the first time ever. And this is how you know there's abundance, right? And philanthropy makes you have a scarcity mindset too. For the first time ever, we were getting grants from philanthropic organizations without restrictions. They were like, you can actually give this to people. And we're like, okay. We had no reporting requirements, nothing. And it was the first time ever that that was happening. So you ain't gonna tell me that there's no money, because I know there is. Because $7.1 million is a lot of money. So that's when all of that started, and that we started to really do that work. So, but this meant, coordinating volunteers to make phone calls to people saying that we had some money for them. The issue here is that although $7.1 million is a lot of money, it's not enough for the community. So we had only one-time payments up to $1,000 for up to 5,000 families. That's it. That's not a lot of people. In Washington state, there's an estimated up to 120,000 undocumented folks, and we reached 5K, right, with that grassroots fund. But this gave us the platform to be able to say, look, undocumented people are here, undocumented people need money, and they just need like financial support during this time. So that's when we started pushing the governor's office, because we're like, hello, you got a bunch of people here with no access to money because everything is being put into unemployment, which we cannot access. So you got to do something about it. So in another coalition of like 30 plus partners, we pushed the governor's office around, we know that there's money out there. We know that there's CARES Act money that's also very unrestricted that can go to undocumented people. And they kept saying, no, there's no money, there's no money, there's no money. And then it was, I believe it was June 2020, when there was a decision around DACA for the Supreme Court. So a couple of us got invited to celebrate on a Zoom with, not a Zoom, but whatever platform they use, with the governor's office. And we're like, okay. And we're organizers here, so we already know how we're gonna disrupt this. They're like, you think we're celebrating DACA? No, we're asking you to invest in this. The minute the question comes out, the governor gets up and leaves that call. So then we're like, you mess with the wrong people. We're angry, so we're pissed off. And we do an open letter. We blast it all over social media because we pretty good at social media. So we blast it on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We send it directly to them, and you're like, and there's a specific ask right there about creating a fund for undocumented folks, because it shouldn't be on community only to do this. And our phrase that we kept saying is that when government fails, community provides. And that's what was already happening. Our community was providing for community because the government had failed us. So it was time for them to step up, because what we were doing was great, but it was not sustainable. And that was when, after that disruption and after that public letter, we get a call saying, okay, we have money. You always had the money. A letter didn't change how much money you had. It was there. You just didn't allocate it to undocumented folks till now. So when that was allocated, I believe the initial amount was $40 million, which was going to reach a lot of undocumented folks throughout the state, which was really awesome. We reached every single state. And guess what? There was leftover CARES Act money. So then there was more money. And I believe up to this day, it's been over $60 million specifically for undocumented folks. And it's probably more. I know somebody in the chat knows exactly how much it is, because I know they're in the call. But that's what happened. And that's what really pushed that effort, is like this grassroots fund that started with 5 friends that raised this much money for undocumented folks, led to being able to advocate with the community for another fund that the government finally gave us money for. But all the credit goes back to the community and to undocumented folks for starting this up, right? Because all the government did was give us the money. Community had to administer, community had to do the outreach, community had to do everything else, right? So it was labor once again for us. And although that's pretty cool, there's now up to $60 million on top of the $7 million. That's still not enough, because it's one-time payment relief. So the big advocacy that WDC is doing right now is that we are working on a report that COO funded, which is really cool, to tell this story, right? So we say like we're documenting the story of the undocumented during the pandemic, to be able to use it as a tool for advocacy to secure unemployment insurance for undocumented folks in Washington state and healthcare insurance, because we also don't have access to that. And the issue that's why, like, for me was when I said that earlier, like scarcity is made, it doesn't exist. This is a perfect example of it, because we know that there's resources out there for undocumented folks. We're just being purposely excluded from them. Thank you, David. 127 million bucks is what it is. Yeah, I was wrong. But essentially, we need more, and we need to push, right? And that's what we're doing. We're pushing the government to do better. We push philanthropy to do better. They did for that moment. We'll see if they continue to give unrestricted funds. At that moment, they did. But, you know, it's interesting to me how people think the pandemic is over when it's not. So we need that unrestricted funding still. We need those advocacy efforts still. We need that sustainability still. It wasn't a March 2020 thing only. No, it's October 2021, and this is far from over, and our community needs more than it has been getting. So from that definition of abundance when it comes to money and resources, that's where we are. And we just know that our community needs and deserves so much more.
Scarcity where? Scarcity who? We don't know her, right? I mean, I feel like the power, right, of you all being able to use your voices, use what you knew were the things that you all needed, and then really create it is just like, I'm feeling fired up and trying to think about, okay, what else do we need to be doing? What should funders and philanthropy be supporting? What can people be doing? And so I want to ask you all that. I want to ask you, you know, what is required and who is it required from for the culture of your work to be sustained? What kinds of things need to happen? And I'm going to be honest, I got real into what you were saying, and I'm like, who am I supposed to call on right now? So let's give you a break. Maybe Rebecca, and then we can hear from Senator Nobles.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was getting caught up too. I love hearing from everyone else, their perspective. You know, as we were preparing for this panel, someone referred to it as like the pre-funk panel, because we were having just a great time getting to know each other and sharing all the work. So it's great to hear even more. So in thinking about what needs to happen, sorry, I got lost again. Could you repeat the question?
Of course. What needs to happen for the culture of your work and the work to be sustained? So like, as you're talking about, you all are fighting a lot of these individual battles and, you know, conversations with government around funding resources or sort of things that need to shift. So what kinds of things, or one of the things I like to say is, if you had a magic wand, right, you could like, boop, we're going to shift this piece of culture or the way that funding operates. What would you shift to make your work more flourish even more?
Right. Thank you for repeating that. When we were going over this question yesterday, honestly, Alejandra and I looked at each other. We're like reporting, you know, like these things that are super you know, intuitive. You know, you think, oh, okay, less intensive reporting, less qualifications. But then we started thinking about that first check-in question, right? So we're all talking about how we're doing, like how are we doing, the people that are out here creating abundance, challenging systems, challenging funders, how are we doing? And I feel like, you know, Alejandra was talking about she had a manicure meeting, you know, how can we start to create a different mindset around what this work looks like and how it's affecting us? Like, how can we, I'm sorry, my dog's choosing right now to bark. How can we create a different idea of what this work looks like and how we take care of ourselves? So kind of pivoting from the standard, taking away the reports and taking away the qualifications and all these huge barriers. I mean, yes, deal with that too, but also just creating a different mindset around how supporting communities and the people that are serving this work, how we take care of ourselves. I'm gonna go ahead and mute and take care of my dog. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And I'll happily jump in. And I think in addition to helping our communities to disconnect from that rat race and that scarcity mindset of, I have to get this before you get it. And at the Black Future Co-op Fund, we definitely are working on just building collective power. But what I would say to traditional philanthropy is to be honest about the overinvestment still in white-led organizations whose revenues are significantly larger than Black-led organizations. Philanthropy has to also be honest about white boards and staff still primarily making decisions about investments in communities of color and how those board and staff dynamics need to continue to change. And I invite, and my co-architects invite philanthropy to join us in the work that we are doing. I mean, we have 4 areas of impact: connecting Black communities for collective power. And we invite philanthropy to assist with that. We're trying to change the paradigm of philanthropy, but we want to see everyone else work really hard to connect Black people and Black communities across the state. We want to see other philanthropic organizations focus on healing and promoting sharing ideas and promoting building common agendas instead of us fighting over the same fund, especially small funds with large reporting criteria. We invite philanthropy to join us in promoting a truthful narrative about Black people, a truthful Black narrative that centers Black voices, that recognizes and uplifts true Black narratives across the state. And we say in the Black Future Co-op Fund that we simply want to be good ancestors. And we know that we stand on the shoulders of our grandmothers, of our kind of warrior ancestors and brothers and sisters and fathers and cousins. And there is an abundance of beautiful stories and narratives about the Black community, including the history of the role that the Black community has played in philanthropy from the beginning of time through churches and fraternities and sororities and social justice movements. So lifting up that Black narrative, continue to invest in Black generational prosperity. We focus on Black generational health, wealth, and well-being at the Black Future Co-op Fund, but we have to make sure that Black people are being heard and listened to and are a part of shaping all of our communities in government, in philanthropy, and our daily workspaces. And for generations to come, we want to make sure that Black communities and Black folks and our Black-led organizations are leading the way, and that there are investments to strengthen all of those efforts. And we, again, want help changing and shifting the paradigm of philanthropy. We're focused on making very intentional investments in Black well-being, in Black health and Black wealth, but we need all of philanthropy to join us in this work. I love that we just in August finished celebrating Black Philanthropy Month and had this opportunity to really acknowledge not just our history of giving and the importance of giving to Black-led organizations, but really just invite voices to celebrate, as I mentioned earlier, that Black genius, art, culture, joy, and it's in everything that we do. And so in order to shift that paradigm, there has to be a recognition of Black humanity and the humanity of other communities of color, but it will take more than the Black Future Co-op Fund and, the nearly $15 million that we have raised, and the goal in the next, year or two to reach 25 million to directly invest, but it will take our entire community to work really hard to match those values and those efforts. But what we do know is we can't wait. And what we do know is philanthropy has to change. And I think that's what's being communicated by the other panelists today. And for us, it is changing anti-Black policies, changing philanthropic practices, and making sure that our communities have access to the wealth that exists in this country, and abundance of wealth that exists in this country.
Wow, I am so glad we are recording, right? I mean, that is just, somebody said in the chat that you shared a mouthful of truths, right? So thank you so much for that. Ale or Alejandra, would you like to add to that?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think, oh, no, Ale, you go. You have the
No,
short.
go ahead, go ahead.
You go. All right, we're gonna just do this for the rest of the time. Uh, the ultimate four-way stop. What I would say is that, like, first of all, like in the tension of abundance and scarcity, like I just want to shout out to like Dion and Kai and Roxana and Senator Nobles, like who's pushing, right? And we're here because of the pushing, right? Or like the OG, like Cynthia Renfro, folks like that, OG people of color and philanthropy. Like this has been a long go, and it is getting better. People do understand that small community-led groups that like are in with families are responsive to actually real life stories on a daily is where the real solutions are, where the real power is, where the real joy is, where the real like transformation of our region is. That said, we got a long way to go. What was it? It was 1.3% that of Latino groups, like of all philanthropy, Latino groups used to get 1.3%. We're at like 1.8 now. Like, woo. And it's been a while since somebody's asked me, as a Latino group, can you actually handle a budget? But like, some of those pieces are there. So it's sort of just like, how can we free each other and like have this really deep relationship to like think about abundance in a different way, right? And think about trust. Like I hear Senator Noble say 25 million. I'm thinking somebody should be able to drop 25 million right now for her. You know what I mean? Like there ain't no reason. Like today, maybe. Like let's get a deadline. So
okay, wait, I need a moderator point of privilege, because I think this is really real. Because one of the things as philanthropy is sort of starting to shift, right? People are like, well, we're doing so much, right? And for you to just point that out, right? That this so much equates to a 0.3% increase in the funds that are coming to your community is really not doing enough at all, right? And so in this moment where we're talking about, we're having this racial reckoning and we're seeing so much shift, I think it's so important, and I'm so grateful for you all to really put that in context and say, no, no, we are at the bottom of the hill right now, right? And we are on an incline and we need to keep going, because even when we get to parity, that doesn't actually get to reparations for decades of disinvestment. And I love the way you said that, Senator Noble's overinvestment in white-led organizations. So, okay, I'm gonna be quiet again, but I just really appreciate you. Ale, did you wanna take us home? And then I'm gonna close this out with a question around imagination and thinking about the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I agree with everything that everybody said. And I think like the two things that were really difficult for us when it came to all the work that we were doing is, one, there isn't an investment in a lot of grassroots-led orgs, like actually grassroots as hell, like no nonprofit status, just like people organizing together. There is an investment in that, because often to get a grant, you need all this like BS. And I get people need to protect their nonprofit status and all that stuff, but like those things also need to change, right? Which might be government change, but still like it becomes really difficult to actually invest directly into the people who need it. Not that other people don't need it, but like the people who are in the ground too, not just the people in nonprofits representing those people. And like, I think that one is also really important. And I think the other one that I saw is there's so many grants out there to do work, but not to sustain the work. It has been the most difficult part to actually tell people, don't you think that in order to administer this money that we're supposed to give out to community, we should get some money to be able to do that? The fact that philanthropy in particular does not give enough like operation grants, things like that, like that there isn't like, oh, we want to give you $1 million. Great. What about the operating cost for the actual people doing the labor? Oh, we don't have that. So you want us to do this work for free. So like there's a lot of that. So it's really around the fact that how do we think about money beyond the concept of the nonprofit industrial complex, and then also the sustainability of it, right? Because as long as we stay within capitalism, it's really hard, right? Like it's really hard to work without money. So what is changing there? And how do we make sure that while we're doing this work, we're not upholding the status quo of the nonprofit industrial complex too? Why we want folks to fund more communities of color, let's get out of the white way of funding communities of color too, right? Like, what about funding communities of color in new ways that have never existed? So I think that one is really important because we, I wouldn't want, anyways, I don't know, but like, I think about it a lot. I don't have a solution, but think about it a lot when it comes to that too, because yeah, we don't have to do it like white people did it. We should do it better. Okay.
Thank you. I love that. And I'm gonna close this because it's 1:20 and I know we're gonna close at 1:30. So I want to ask all of our panelists to sort of give us a final thought, a final word on this question. So if you are, tapping into your imagination and thinking about a world where we are all living from a place of abundance, what does it look like? What does it sound, feel, smell, taste like? What is that vision for the future where we are truly living in our goal of being in a place of abundance? And why don't I go ahead and I'll start with Alejandra Trace, and then I will go to Senator Nobles, Rebecca, and then close with Ale.
I was like, no, don't pick me. Don't pick me.
You're first on my screen.
Don't worry about it. The thing is, there was just so much good stuff. I'm still trying to digest everything I heard. I think, Rebecca and I were cracking up because we talked about this question. I was like, what's it taste like? It tastes like tequila. just because well, we did this big meeting. All right. Also not grant funded, but we did a tequila tasting. And part of what was great about that, is it's sort of like, we didn't have much tequila, so this is not where the inspiration came from. But it was like this idea we learned about different areas of tequila making, some about the Mexican culture, and all these other things, right? And what it was a celebration, right? We worked all day and we celebrated at the end. And in that kind of environment, it's the kind of environment that inspires people to get each other's back. It's the kind of environment that inspires people to be inspired and to dream big. We're in so many meetings that are so transactional and so task oriented that it doesn't give us the space to think big. It doesn't give us the space to reimagine, right? Shifting the world from what it is to what it should be. And all organizing is disorganizing, and we need that space to really think about entirely new systems, entirely new ways of doing philanthropy, of really questioning some of the main constructs, and also the joy. We love seeing each other on the the Economic BIPOC Alliance. It's fun, y'all. So and realizing that that's part of what feeds us too. We're not machines. We're humans that crave all the best parts of being alive, right? Food, connection, all those pieces, right? So I don't know if that was where we're going, but that's what I had given.
Thank you. And I thought about this again from that place of abundance. And for me, it may be a little bit cheesy, but I like the outdoors and candy. And so just thinking about what this means to me, this is what I wrote down. So abundance sounds hollow, like there's an echo, and it feels light and airy like cotton candy clouds, and it tastes sweet like that berry jam and fair scones, and it looks a little like a Thanksgiving spread, an abundance of everything where you can get seconds and thirds and a to-go plate, but it's all available for you, and it smells fresh and crisp like air that never seems to diminish. It's an abundance.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking the same thing, Senator Nobles, when I was thinking of that question. Believe it or not, I landed on cotton candy and airy as well. So I was like, whoa, we're on the same wavelength. But to kind of also connect to what Alejandra was saying, we find in the Unincorporated BIPOC Alliance that we've built a lot of the abundance into the work that we're doing, even going back to creating the connections and relationships before we did the proposal to advocate for those funds. Abundance feels like time, the gift of time to establish these really fruitful, fulfilling relationships, to fit in those times for the tequila tasting or the mani-pedi meetings, that you're able to serve yourself and your community in a way that's light and airy. And that abundance is so comforting because it takes away that urgent need to quantify and produce and do things that are really transactional, which is not what this work is about. That's not what any of us do. That's not what's at the top of our tongue. So it just gives us that freedom to be able to be more authentically who we are when we show up, instead of coming into spaces and applying for funds. And we have to kind of put on these pieces to be able to fit into that world. It gives us that freedom to be ourselves and to create together and to serve alongside each other without that competition and urgency. So I'm going to stick back to that cotton candy airiness with Senator Noble. So thank you.
Alec?
Yeah. What comes up for me right now, I'm not poetic. That was pretty cool. What comes up for me right now is, at least for my community, I think being able to be at peace, and be able to find a little piece of home in a place that constantly excludes us. I think the only times I felt belonging in this country has been when I've been with my community, right? With the community that I've been able to build here, which is powerful and gets out and tries and to be constantly dismantling, right? That scarcity mindset, but really that it just creates that little piece of home. Like the reason I love being with my friends constantly and why I organize with them is because I don't have to explain what it feels like, and that constantly, like, it's liberating, a little liberating, because liberation will be when all borders end. But yeah, so like I think of that, and I think like being able to have that little piece of home and be able to like have that as a way to, I don't know, to feel your heart and to feel that that's abundant enough to be able to not only survive here, but to thrive. And I forgot who said it earlier, but somebody mentioned joy. Maybe I think it was, I don't remember, but somebody mentioned joy. Okay, yeah. And it reminded me that in the undocumented community, there's been a movement lately about talking about undocumented joy, because we only talk about the harm that we get from this country. And what about the joy, right, too? And although it's hard, being able to have that undocumented joy too, I think would I don't know, fill the heart so it feels abundant within it. So, and then the solidarity with other communities too, right? And the intersection within the undocumented community too that it has. Yeah, not poetic, but good enough.
Visionary, incredibly visionary. All of you are and have been. And I feel so grateful to have gotten to share this space with you all this afternoon. And so both energized and like grounded by your leadership and the work that you're doing and what you shared with us. So I just want to express on behalf of all of us, just deep, profound gratitude and trust that, that this world and our work is better because you all are leading it. So thank you so much. And with that, I am going to pass it back to either Kalayan or Roxana. I do not remember whom, but they're gonna share with us a final word, and then we'll close out and end on time. We love to see it.
Thanks, Dion, and thanks to all of our amazing panelists. I got a lot to think about. I'm glad I carved out some time after this to kind of just sit with my thoughts. We always end with that imagination question, because as Trisha Hersey says from the Net Ministry, our imagination is sacred. And it is beautiful to be able to listen to you all share your imagination, but to also witness you all live in that imagination. So I just want to thank you all so much for the creativity and the brilliance that you all gift to this world, and to the people in your communities, and for all the work that you do. I hope you get some rest. I hope you get to take a nap. I hope you get to drink a glass of water and eat some good food. and feel calm and peace because y'all are doing some amazing, amazing work. Thank you to everybody who was here and interacted in the chat. I really appreciate it. As a reminder, we have another event coming up, which is Cultivating Community Healing, which is event 5, and it'll be happening in a couple weeks. We doubled up this month because last month COO had Meeting the Moment. I hope y'all were able to attend that as well. You will also get a survey in your email to provide us some feedback as we continue to do this work, do the speaker series. We got 2 more events. We're almost at the finish line. Again, thank you to everybody who has been journeying with us. Thank you so much. Blessings. Take care, everybody. Cuídense and stay fly. I'll see you later.